Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the recent convictions of a number of ANTIFA foot soldier, lefty, Globo-Lefty foot soldier goons in, I think it was Texas, and they were attempting to harass and interdict and otherwise annoy the people at an ICE facility, and they were maybe hoping in the wider scheme of things to spring some of these illegal aliens out of the detention centre. So anyway, it's quite clearly organised, as all these Antifa things are. So Antifa, these people got arrested, and a number of them been charged with a variety of crimes, including terrorism, by the way. Now, part of the case that the government used against the prosecutors used against these people was part of it was intent. You intended to do, to harm ICE. You intended to do this. You intended to do that. Now, I thought that was a bit sketchy, the intention. But let's assume that they came to harass but one of them had a gun and shot a law enforcement officer. So I mean, this is all something that needs to be taken into account, and some were acquitted on some charges, not others. So it was kind of a mixed bag. Now, I don't know about the sentencing. Whether they're all going to be sentenced and all are going to get a few years in prison or something. I don't know how that's going to play out, and whether there'll be any, so very soft terms like, you get 10 years, but 2 years is enough, and then we'll let you go. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out exactly. But the convictions are really what I wanted to focus on, and the use of intent. Now, I'm sort of, as an advocate for everyone equal before the law, the facts and the evidence matter. I'm not one that subscribes to this idea of intent. With this issue of ideological crime and hate crime, intent makes up a big part of that thinking, that form of jurisprudence, as it did, by the way, in the communist countries. You intended to embrace capitalist ideas. You therefore intend to be an enemy of the people. You therefore intended to be a counter-revolutionary. Therefore, prison for you, motherfucker. So the majority of convictions for these sort of things were not only ideological, but they focused on presumed intent. There was no evidence for this, but they could connect unrelated things. Like, well, you once got a book out of the library of one of Shakespeare's plays. The only people that are bourgeois and capitalist and want to oppress the people of the communists, only those people would get out that sort of book. That means you intended to do that. So they could create all these oblique relationships between action and event and so on and so forth, and then cook up this whole thing about intent. So it's very ideological, and again, it was used in the communist societies and was the basis for it. For example, in Pol Pot's Cambodia, it would be if you wore glasses, that means you intended to be an intellectual. And if you intended to be intellectual, that means you intended to oppress the people. Into the prison for you, motherfucker. And so intent, so they could just invent evidence against you by, again, ideologically evidenced by assuming intent. So I'm against the idea of use of intent. And I've seen it misused and horribly abused for example, in the divorce courts. The woman accuses the husband of he was abusing the children. Now, there's no evidence of that. It's just an accusation. Well, where did this, when did this abuse occur? I don't know. Where did it occur? Oh, fuck, I have no idea. What were these abuses? No, search me. But the judge will still, because the activist judge, ideological fanatic activist, will still say, well, I don't care if there's no evidence. You did it, you prove you didn't do it. So let's say the guy proves he couldn't possibly have done it, it never happened. Then the judge just pivots around to the next position. Okay, well, all right, you didn't do it, but you intended to do it. Your intent was to abuse the child. Therefore, so the guy still gets nailed on this presumed intent, which just invented ideologically out of thin air. Now, if you look at the injunctions against the Trump administration's deportation efforts, you'll note again, keen observers, intent either is totally the basis for the injunction or nearly all of it. So well, you intend to make America white again. You intend to harm black and brown people. You intend to be a white supremacist. So that they can just presume these activist judges, who are just straight out activists, they're not fucking judges. So they presume to say, well, we're just going to say your intent was X. And a number of these injunctions, incredibly in my view, say, you're just a white supremacist, so we're not going to let you do that. I'm going to stop you from doing that, you white supremacist Nazi. That was your intention is to do what? Now, one of these injunctions was sending people back to Haiti, but Haiti is a 99.99% black country. So if you're going to deport people back to Haiti who are Haitians, they're going to be black. So to then say, well, you're only picking on them, because they're black. Well, no, Haitians are black. What else would they be? And this is part of the lunacy of ideological law and, of course, presuming intent. Now, the lefties sort of celebrate this. Yeah, we're fixing your little red wagon, you fucking damn Nazi. But so that's they celebrate this idea that these activist judges use presumed intent. We all know you're fucking Hitler, so there, suck on that motherfucker. But when now in this case in Texas, with these Antifa people, intent made up part of the government's case. So you intended to do this, that, and the next thing, which they may well have done. If you look at the text going back and forth between them, that the government prosecutors put forward as evidence in the case, there is a circumstantial case to say, well, gee whiz, you guys were clearly, but still, I'm very reluctant to use intent as the basis for a prosecution or an injunction or any other legal injunction for that matter. But intent was nonetheless used. I don't think it made up the whole case, but it did make up some of the case. A couple of the people I think were nailed on what you could say was intent, others on what they actually did, and the clear and unimpeachable evidence that was put forward. But nonetheless, intent is. But the leftist, the leftist media outlets and the leftist groups and NGO commentators, in fact, everyone on the commentariat, the leftist side of the commentariat, which is pretty much the whole commentariat, by the way, they were incandescent with rage. How dare they use intent as a basis? What about facts and evidence? We want facts. And so when they're in the firing line, which is rare, but when they are, they insist that intent should have nothing to do with it. But they're more than they celebrate. They celebrate from the rooftops when an intent type injunction is used against President Trump. But when that same intent practice of jurisprudence, practice of law is used against them, or in this case, their foot soldiers and Antifa, they are outraged by it. What an injustice! Intent, what an injustice! You're criminalizing us, you mother. But so this goes to show that no, they don't. For some reason, they're shameless in this, where they don't see that they do have a double standard, whereas most clearly they do. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.